Okay, so the lesson I'm going to talk about right now is teaching you guys how to do simplest radical form. Okay, so simplest radical form is basically just reducing radicals, kind of like we reduce fractions. So obviously, if you had a fraction of 4/8, um, we always simplify and reduce it as low as possible, and that's obviously 1/2. So let's talk about um, easy ones. So we know that the square root of 25 is 5. We know the square root of 81 is 9. These are easy because they're perfect square numbers. Remember our list that we got um, at the beginning of the year? I gave it to you in chapter 1. It was a whole list of perfect squares and perfect cubes. Actually, I'm going to pause this for a second and I'm going to go find that sheet for you guys. Okay, I actually found it. So, remember this? Perfect square and perfect cube numbers. I gave that to you in chapter 1, and I had you go through and fill them all in. Right now, um, knowing these factors makes getting things into simplest radical form a lot easier. Okay. All right, so back to this. So, why is the square root of 12 not as easy? Okay, well, obviously, because it's not a perfect square. So what you do is you try to find the largest perfect square number that goes into 12. And we'll talk about why you need to find the largest number here in a little bit. So what are the factors of 12? The factors of 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. And obviously in this list, 4 is the only number that's a perfect square. So this is kind of easy because we only have one option. So let me slide this up here a little bit. Okay. So with the square root of 12, I'm going to break it down to the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Notice that part of this can actually be simplified. So what is the square root of 4? 2, right? So the square root of 4 is 2. I'm just showing right here that truly all of this is multiplication. So you don't really have to show this step if you understand that the square root of 4 turns to 2 and it's multiplied by the square root of 3. Okay, excuse me. All right, so that is now in simplest radical form because we took out and simplified the perfect square number, the largest perfect square number. Why would we not use the square root of 6 times the square root of 2? Those are factors of 12. There's nothing wrong with this. This is true. The square root of 12 is the square root of 6 times the square root of 2. But neither one of these are simplifiable. So they're kind of worthless when we're doing simplest radical form. So with that being said, let me show you a few more examples. Okay, so remember, always try to find the largest perfect square number. And I'm going to talk about that. Like I said, we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, so the square root of 18, out of all the factors of 18, the largest perfect square number, actually the only perfect square number, is 9. So the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. What happens with the square root of 9? It becomes 3. Not the square root of 3, just 3. And the final simplest radical form answer is 3 the square root of 2. 24. So let's look at the square root of 24. So there's lots of factors of 24. The only perfect square number that goes into 24 is 4. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 6 reduces down to 2 the square root of 6. That right there becomes a 2. Not a square root of 2, a 2, because it's simplifiable, which is the whole point, because we're doing simplest radical form. Okay, the square root of 32. So the square root of 32 is the first one that actually has multiple factors that are perfect squares. But I'm going to show you the correct way to do it right now. So the largest perfect square that goes into 32 is 16. So the square root of 16 times the square root of 2 is actually 4 radical 2. And that is simplest radical form. We'll talk about this one again in a couple minutes. All right. Have any of you noticed that I always put the perfect square number first? Like right here. I'm showing you the perfect square number first. You don't have to put the perfect square number first. I just do it because visually it's easier for me. If you put them in a different order, it doesn't matter. It's just don't write the square root of 2 times 4 like that. Okay. Whenever we have a number that is simplified, we put it out front. So that isn't correct. Okay. All right. The square root of 5. Nothing to do with that because the square root of 5 is already in simplest radical form. So sometimes you will have radicals that can't be reduced. We're just obviously practicing that right now. Okay. What do we do if there is a number out front? Because the worksheet I'm going to give you actually does have a worksheet out front. So 5 the square root of 20. If you look at that, it's multiplication. So it's 5 being multiplied by whatever you do to the square root of 20 to get it in simplest radical form. So look at my steps. Square root of 4 times the square root of 5. The square root of 4 becomes 2, not the square root of 2, just a 2. So if you look at all my steps right here, it's basically just all multiplication out front. So when you simplify that one and that becomes a 2, it just gets multiplied by the 5 that's already out there. So final answer is 10 the square root of 5. Okay, and it doesn't matter over here if the number out front is negative. That's irrelevant. It's just a negative number and you multiply by a negative number. So the largest square root that goes into 98 is 49. So 49 and 2 are the two radicals I break it up into. The square root of 49 is 7. So 7 gets multiplied by negative 2. And the final answer is negative 14 the square root of 2. Okay. Some of you are probably asking yourselves, do I have to show all that work? Some of you are probably saying this is easy. If I can just get it, can I just write out the answer? Yes, absolutely. Okay. So with 4/8, do you have to show me that you divide by 2 and divide by 2 to get to 2/4? Do you have to show me that you divide by 2 and divide by 2 to get to 1/2? No, you don't have to show me that work. If you can just do it from 4/8 to 1/2, then do it. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about. Okay. Let's say you're simplifying the square root of 32. Like one of you is doing it one way and one of you is doing it another way, and you don't get the same answer. Okay. So let's say one of you has it like this: the square root of 4 times the square root of 8. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just when you look at 2 the square root of 8, there's still a perfect square number that goes into the square root of 8. Okay, so essentially what you just did was you did 4/8 to 2/4. You reduced 4/8 to 2/4. Great. You're just not done yet. Okay, so let's finish this work. So 2 the square root of 8 is 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. This becomes a 2. So 2 times 2 is 4 for the square root of 2. So what you didn't do is way up here. You did not get the largest perfect square number that went into 32. And that's why getting the largest perfect square number is so important. Because if you don't, you still need to finish. Okay? All right. So with that being said, I'm giving you this worksheet. I will scan it and I will post it in case any of you want to print it out, but you don't have to print it out. You can just show your work on separate paper. If you notice, it actually is a riddle worksheet, and I'll give you the riddle worksheet, a picture of that in a little bit. But what I don't want you to do is, so on the riddle worksheet, there's answers over here. I don't want you to like look right here and have the answers help you. So I want you to work out all of these right here. And then in a little bit, I will post the full worksheet and you can do the riddle to it. And then you'll obviously know if you have the correct answers or not. Okay. All right. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and good luck.